Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to those folks in the audience. And it looks like we have a few folks on Zoom. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The March 19th regular Board of Education meeting has been canceled. The next regular Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, March 22nd at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. So thank you all for joining us. I hope everyone had a good break. So welcome back, and welcome back without masks. I'm sure Alan, Dr. Adley will fill us in, but I've heard very positive feedback about everyone being back at school, and I'm sure the sunshine and the warmer weather helps. And we got good news late in the week about the masking and buses. So communication went out around that. So I think we had a great start to the second half of the year. So thank you all. It's been a long haul. A lot of feedback, a lot of concern, letters to the state, which I think we heard, which were heard. And I think we're at a good place. And we're at a good place as a community from a vaccination standpoint and from just looking out for each other. So welcome back without masks. Looking forward to a great spring. We'll move on, Michelle, to public comment.
Good evening. For participants in person, please wait for the chairperson to acknowledge and call each participant to the microphone. For participants via Zoom, please click the raised hand option. The facilitator will acknowledge and unmute each participant. For all participants, please state your name and address for the record log. Each participant will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Are there any in-person, any public comments?
We'll start with people that are in the audience. Okay, we will move on to folks on Zoom.
There are no raised hands.
Okay, good. We will have public comment toward the end. So thank you. So we'll move on to Dr. Adley, the superintendent's report.
Good evening and welcome back, everyone. It's nice to see you here. Just a word of appreciation for everyone and responding to ever-changing guidelines and communications regarding the status of return to school. So I thank you for that. I don't mean to be disruptive to people, but we're just responding to information as it comes in. But it's good to see everybody back, and also certainly respecting those people who the option to wear masks. We're being very respectful of that. And Mr. Shelton has been in the district for the past 3 days, and he kicked off yesterday the DEI team. He's been working with our teachers, he's working with our administration, student groups, and we had a successful DEI team kickoff yesterday. We had there's about 60 participants on the team. There's 50 or 50. There's actually 63. 63 actually attended yesterday. Right, there's about 58 who actually were in attendance, and it was a very productive and positive first step. And I know board members, we had 2 representatives on the from the board, and they may be able to speak to that later if we have a chat about it. The district also celebrated today Read Across America Day. The elementary schools were celebrating literacy. I had the opportunity to read the kindergarten and second grade classes, and I know for some of the other classes there'll be literacy challenges going on through the month of March. We did provide testimony, as the board chair spoke to, on excess cost funding for special educations on behalf of our district and also on behalf of the districts across the state of Connecticut. I want to share that Dr. Ross Green visited the Royal School today, and he was present to meet with Dr. Guerin and her team. And you may remember that Dr. Green is sort of the author of certainly many books, but also the model of CPS, which is Collaborative Proactive Solutions. You heard that as part of our special education support services presentation. And Dr. Green came down. He was so impressed with the school and the district, and in particular Royal, for its implementation of CPS, that he came down to see firsthand what was going on. He was so impressed that he's going to make a designation of it being a model CPS school. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I'll look into it. But it does recognize the work of Dr. Guerin and her team around these social emotional issues, and it's just a tremendous thing. And we'll be looking to share that with the other schools. We did make the presentation to the Board of Finance last night. That was received the budget. Just a wee reminder, and we'll get details out, more details in terms of the actual day itself. There's a tour of the schools on Saturday, March 12th. And the Board of Education work session with the Board of Ed has been set for March 29th. I'll send that under separate communication, but it's just an update. Oxbridge will commence its unified sports team, getting back together in March. They also have a construction expo on March 11th that is being put on by the architects and O&G, the contractors, and that'll be in the gym all day on March 11th. There will be a concrete mixing vehicle that will be outside for the students too. So they have been good collaborative partners at Oxbridge, our architects and our construction company, and it's a good learning opportunity for our students. The self-reflection NES for the NASC visit at the high school will be submitted this Friday, and that's will provide the collaborative visiting team that will be advanced information about the district and a self-study for the April 4th or 5th visit. We had the opportunity today to stop by the Middlesex, which had musicians for blues and beyond, and our 8th graders were studying the historical influences on music. And the kids in the 8th grade were tapping along to anything from James Brown to Bruno Mars at the end of the day. Middle school is also participating in a kindness spirit week next week, and they'll be challenging sex middle school up in New Canaan. So follow the tweets of both principals to see how we get along. March conferences are 16, 17, and 18. There are evening conferences on March 17th also, and they are in person or Zoom. That's one of the things that we've learned also, that for some parents, it's just as easy an option, a preferred option to do that from home. So that's what we'll be doing for the March conferences. Currently, the last date for the students are Friday, June 17th, but we'll set that date whenever we have the next Board of Ed meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Move on to approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the following minutes of the regular meeting held on February 8th, 2022, and the minutes of the special meeting held on February 17th, 2022. May I have a motion, Mrs. McCammon, second by Mr. Sini. All those in favor? For all those that are here. Good. Thank you. Any board committee reports? Yes, Mrs. McCammon.
The Finance Committee met last month, and there are 3 transfers that the committee is recommending move forward.
I know I think we mentioned it the last time, the Hindley Royal and Homes Building Committee has been seated. And there is a meeting tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. They will be rounding out the ex officio members. And I was on a call today with some of those folks, and they're already organizing a request from the Board of Finance to start an initial funding to start architects and other stuff that has to be done to start prepping that. So they're in full swing. And so that's exciting. Any other board committee reports? Okay, we will move on to presentations and discussions. Dr. Adley, update on the schools.
So we have some corporate metrics to share. Some of these are updated since the packet was distributed prior. We have more updates from the state. We updated about test kits that we have received, school procedures, just any changes that have essentially taken place, and then this sort of safe return and continuity of services plan that this all falls under. I'll talk about just in general. So I'll show you the data for the COVID metrics. The Department of Public Health did finally issue some guidelines, and I'll share a little bit what those are this evening. I've included this for this presentation. The CIAC came out with guidelines that we quickly aligned to, and really already aligned to in many ways, which was the return to practice, and the if a student exhibited COVID, or sorry, was diagnosed with having COVID, it would be the same 5 days and return after the 5 days in the test. So school procedures are essentially back to some regular practices. We certainly continue to emphasize good hygiene that we would do during the flu season anyway. And the safe return plan, that'll be completely updated on the website, because anything we're doing now, that plan has to reflect whatever we're doing or whatever we're not doing. So that'll be quickly updated just to reflect that kind of the current status. And Emily and Chris are working at that, and we'll have it up for the end of the week. So this is kind of the slide that the board had. So you can see this, the cases were 77, 25.3 per 100,000. And here again, we're dropping again. Now we're continuing to be red here, so you can see sort of, and basically we've learned how to mitigate some of the circumstances since in the past, basically during the past 2 years. I say red because the CDC came out with these general parameters, and this was just recently this week that we had this discussion, and we met with the medical team just to review this. Now this is really a 7-day average. When you do the mathematics of it, it kind of is much the same as this, right? Because this is 2 weeks. So it's the mathematics of it sort of comes out the same. And so this is sort of guidelines as to if you have fewer than 200 new cases, what are the indicators for that? 200 or more. So it's given us these sort of, again, indicators to have discussions around. And then this is the framework. I'm not going to go into this because honestly, this is kind of what we've been discussing the whole way along. Our medical advisors and medical team who came here at the last meeting, these types of decision making is really what we have been doing in light of, I can go backwards again, for instance, hospitalizations, acuteness of what we're experiencing, also with the cases and also with the level of quarantine. And so this is the process, except really essentially that our medical team has been going through. So once these are highlighted, you're meant to go through these particular steps here. If you've had, I'm not going to read that to you, but basically it has been the process. I'll stop there for a moment if you want to, but it's probably a wee bit difficult to digest all in one go, but.
Board questions?
Do you mind just sending this to us?
Sure, just a second, yes, of course. And Michelle, could you just put me back on again, please? I don't know where I lost. Thank you very much. So these are our cases that are updated. Again, you can see we continue to drop, which is a good sign. This is our monthly with the town. These are in your package. You should have this. And these are our weekly updates. Now, the state of Connecticut is going to continue to report theirs bi-weekly. They don't want to change to the weekly update that the CDC are recommending. I just don't think they want to just like lose all the historical, I'll call it pattern and history of the data. But it's really 6 of one, half a dozen the other, because it's sort of working out the same for the most part. So the test kits, we have thousands of test kits. They issued the last delivery to be picked up. We actually don't need all of what we have. Honestly, I took half of what we needed because we got thousands, many thousands, and I didn't want to just take stuff for just to expire. So we had a discussion with the medical team, and I think we have plenty of it. If staff members need it, if parents need it, community members need it, with children in school, they can get it. They just have to go to the nurse's office, and we will send them away with 1 or 2 casts, and they can go back from where if they need it. There will be plenty. So, I mean, that's really the update. I'll just leave it up for questions at the moment.
Any additional board questions or comments?
It was nice that the CDC actually aligned to, the practice that.
Actually, I'm sorry.
Sure,
When you look at other mitigation factors, maybe give us an update on spacing, lunches.
So lunches are essentially they're back together again, and if kids are around a table, we'll encourage them to space, but they're not 3 feet apart. We're not doing a contact tracing. All the furniture. Now there was furniture that was taken out for some spacing. At the moment, we're not just putting it all back in again. That will be a slow transition. To all intents and purposes, most people wouldn't notice that. But there are round tables and there are additional cafeteria tables, but we'll transition into that. But for the most part, the spacing is not a requirement, so we don't need to do that. So we're essentially back. I won't say to normal because it's not normal, but it's certainly back to what looks like some regular practices.
And to release that not normal, are you just going to watch the data and if we don't see, if it continues to get better, you'll slowly implement to normal? Is that kind of the plan?
We're more or less normal. The only thing that I'm talking about really is, for the most part, is some of the furniture to get back in, and I just we'll do that in a thoughtful way with the principals as to what's the best way that makes sense to integrate that back into the classrooms. And it's also a manpower thing that to overload them. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Just following up on that really quick, Alan, is everybody actually, without the furniture, able to sit in the cafeteria, or do we have overflow, or just wondering?
So right now in the elementary schools, that's the case. At the middle school, they're all back in the cafeteria. We haven't replaced all the tables in the high school at this particular point.
So I'm sorry, the K, I missed.
Elementary's all back to where they
They're all
are.
back. Okay, sorry, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Dr. Allen. We'll move on to further discussion and possible action on proposed solar panel project. Mr. Lynch, and we have attorney Matthew Rinelli of Shipman and Goodwin.
Good evening.
Hi, Mr. Lynch.
Hello. So we've been working on this solar panel project for several years now between the Board of Ed Facilities Committee and Finance and et cetera. And we're at the point right now where the contract, and which would be the power purchase agreement, is ready to be decided on by the Board of Ed. And Mr. Rinelli is lawyer for Shipman and Goodwin. He has some information on that to share with you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch.
You're welcome.
Mr. Rinelli, can you hear us and see us? You saw him pop up before, Michelle.
Mr. Rinelli?
Mr. Rinelli, can you hear us, see us?
Yes, I can, but I'm unmuted now.
Okay, great.
Hello, good evening,
Hi,
everyone.
good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure to join you this evening. Thank you to Dr. Adley and the team at the school for work project. I propose I'll give you a overview of the agreement as it stands that's in front of you, and then I'll take questions. So this is what's known as a power purchase agreement. It's a very common agreement used both for commercial entities, but also boards of education and other municipal entities. We have done, I will say, dozens of these for schools around the state. The terms of the agreement that you have are, I think, consistent with commercial or market rate terms. And I'll walk you through a few of them. Essentially, in the agreement, the term seller refers to the Green Bank, who will own the solar facility that's to be built on the roof of the subject schools. And the term buyer refers to the schools or the Board of Education. And that's because essentially what you're contracting to do is to buy all of the power that is generated by the solar facilities located at each individual school. The property, the solar panels and personal property will not be owned by the school. The maintenance will not be the obligation of the school. And the sort of tax credits and other environmental benefits that go along with the solar facility will not be the property of the school. What you're really buying is the right to buy energy at a fixed price that's set out in the contracts. And you have an obligation to buy all of it. Now, the systems are sized so that you will be able to buy all of it, and you'll still probably need to buy additional power from the grid. So it, is took into account what the needs of each facility are. The rates that you'll pay for power under the agreement vary depending on the schools. They range from 0.48 cents per kilowatt hour all the way up to 0.82 cents per kilowatt hour. And again, that is probably driven in large part by the system size. There's a sort of economies of scale, but there are other factors that may influence price. But I would say those prices are consistent with prices I've seen in the market for similar sized systems under similar circumstances. The term of the agreement is 20 years, although each agreement can be extended for up to 2 additional terms of 5 years each. The seller, the Green Bank, is responsible to assess the condition of each roof before the start of construction to make sure that it can support the proposed solar panels. And they also are required under the agreements to comply with any manufacturer warranties associated with the roofs in those schools so that they don't void the warranties for the roofs. The schools do have the ability to conduct limited roof repairs during the term. They'll get up to 5 days each year in which they could turn the system off and conduct any necessary repairs of the roof. They just have to provide notice to the Green Bank and try to schedule those repairs at a time that aren't peak solar production times of the year. In addition, the school gets, or the Board of Ed gets, a purchase option in which they can elect to purchase the system and thereby own it and in essence not pay the middleman anymore. If at any time the schools decide that becomes economically preferable, it obviously would require a capital outlay at that time. There is the sale price would be determined at the time the option is exercised, and it would have to be at a minimum the fair market value of the system as assessed by an expert, a suitable expert. Those purchase options don't start to occur until after the 7th anniversary of these agreements. And finally, at the end of the agreement, the Green Bank has an obligation to remove the systems from the premises. So, in sum, what you're getting is what I would say you're getting is some price stability. You're also getting, at the moment, a discount over what you would pay for power otherwise. And I know these projects have been in the work, and there's been a lot of presentations about the value proposition. And so I'm not going to delve into that. But in essence, I'd say that's a summary of the agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Rinelli.
Welcome.
Mike, could you just refresh us again, this, just for the audience and those listening, the schools that we're doing it on, and then those schools were chosen because those roofs are
Brand
kind
new.
of in line with the timeline of the life of these solar panels, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
third and fourth quarter of this year will be hopefully Hindley and Holmes. And then next year in the spring, second quarter 23 would be Royal and the classroom section, academic section of Oxbridge.
Great.
And then the following year, we'll have a new agreement, hopefully, and we'll do the rest of Oxbridge and the middle school.
Good, thank you. Board questions? Mrs. Ackman?
So thank you. I mean, we have been looking at this for a while, and the price volatility issue has been important to the board. So it's exciting to almost be there. The last question that I think we're still waiting on an answer was the liability question. If there's any faulty issue with materials and someone's hurt on Board of Ed property, do we have an answer of who's liable? And or do we need clarity on who's liable? I hate to say it, if a panel falls on someone's head walking by, is it shared liability? Is it the Green Bank's liability? I just want to know who's responsible for what.
Yeah, Mike, can you actually answer? I think can you answer that?
Yes, I think I can. I can follow up if you like, but under the agreement, both parties are required to carry general liability insurance, which would cover some of the claims that you're probably worried about. And then in addition, I believe there is an indemnification. I believe there's a cross indemnification provision. I'm looking for it as we speak. I think it's section 11 of the agreement. Give me 1 second to scroll down to that.
Okay, this is what I was looking for. So we're good. We don't need a
Yeah.
follow-up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the section, correct.
Thank you. Any other board questions? Mr. Brown?
Just on 11.1, I didn't see fraud carved out. Also, we go back and forth between willful and intentional. I didn't know if there was a reason for the difference between the two. And if you want to look at that and come back, I don't expect a quick on that. Thank you.
Let me just take a quick look. I know that was something we did discuss with the Green Bank. I believe we obviously wanted to cover negligence or intentional misconduct.
Yeah,
And I
gross
believe-
negligence we have, but
Yeah,
but it also starts with negligence and then it goes to gross negligence. So I was just wondering if it had to do because one's dealing with the environmental and one's dealing with the financial liability, or what the distinction was, or maybe there isn't one. I don't know. It's just struggling.
yeah, I apologize. I'm not seeing the gross negligence. Is it 11.1 you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's the third sentence because we have the gross negligence, we have negligence, and then we have a notwithstanding gross negligence further in,
And then we have negligence and willful misconduct.
which is opposed to intentional misconduct. I would think we wouldn't indemnify for fraud.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it does cover, that sentence seems to cover arising out of gross negligence or intentional misconduct, in addition foregoing. Yeah, and then it carves out, obviously not indemnifying for negligent or willful misconduct of the other party. Let's see.
I'm on the same page. As long as we're covered in the general sense and meeting all criteria that we do with other contracts, I'm comfortable. This was so new and that was the question I think Mr. Brown and I were posing last time. I won't speak for him, but as long as we're covered in a sufficient manner.
Yeah, I will take another look at this, but I think it is a typical condition. I think it carves out in the one case, it says you'd be indemnified for such conduct, and then that you wouldn't indemnify the other party if the harm is a result of their willful or willful misconduct or negligence. And I'll just match up the question about the gross negligence, why that's.
Yeah,
why
it's just
that's
gross
differentiated.
willful versus intentional and then fraud. I don't know.
Yeah.
Any of these contracts, I'm not familiar with them, but thank you so much for doing it.
Mrs. McCammon?
I had a question, not so much about this, but I think for Mr. Lynch, we had some concerns about the timeline and being able to get the construction done. When we talked last time, the program has a deadline, doesn't it?
Yes, we're within that deadline. And the way the program lays out, we're within that deadline so that we don't lose our credits.
Yeah.
Which actually help the Green Bank.
Okay.
Fund this. Yeah, we're good.
Thank you.
So we have action on the agenda here. Do we want to move forward with it subject to coming back and just confirming that? Okay, so may I have a motion to authorize the superintendent to submit the power purchase agreement to the Board of Selectmen for approval pending we get confirmation from Mr. Rinelli on 11.1 of the indemnification. Mr. Brown.
Do we need to have it back or if he undertakes to make the conditions that we-
That's fine. Thank you. All right. Motion, Mrs. Ackman, second, Mrs. Best, all those in favor? Okay, good. Mr. Rinelli, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll circle back with
Thank you.
Mr. Lynch tomorrow with an answer to your question.
We'll just get an email out to the board. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you, Mike. It's
Thank
been
you.
years of
Nice
work.
Have a good
job.
night.
Nice job.
Nice to
Thank
see you again, Matt. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Adley. Nice to see you again. Take care. Bye.
We'll move on to a curriculum update on Library Reimagined. Mr. Tranberg and Dr. McGettigan. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McGettigan rather quickly, but just a high-level overview. This is a little bit of what's happened in the past, what we're looking forward to in the future, and in the interim, how are we accommodating some of the ideas from the Libraries Reimagined Committee before we have the physical space to do that work. So, Dr. McGettigan.
Okay, thanks. Good evening. I'm excited to share this update on our Libraries Reimagined project with you all this evening. As you can see from the timeline, the Libraries Reimagined work began in 2017 with the realization that our traditional school libraries needed to evolve in order to meet the needs of today's learners and to align with our district strategic goals. A committee was formed that included teachers, students, parents, administrators, and Board of Ed representation. Through site visits at public and private schools across the region, lots of research, lots of meetings, collaboration with the Wilton School District that was far ahead of us on that timeline, the Libraries Reimagined Committee set to work. A vision statement, operational principles, and core beliefs were developed to serve as a foundation for the work ahead. An initial presentation to the Darien Foundation and the Board of Ed followed. Currently, we have Oxbridge Learning Commons in construction planning, Hindley Homes in Royal, as you know, an initial planning stage. And we had an architect examine the high school, middle school, and Tokenique as an initial inquiry, and those schools were recently discussed at a Board of Ed Facilities Committee meeting. The Reimagine Library is often referred to as a learning commons, which serves as the learning hub for the school. David Lurcher, one of the authors of a key book that coined the term, is considered one of the foremost experts in the area and worked closely with Wilton in helping them rethink their libraries as learning commons. Here you can see the committee's vision statement and operational principle. At the bottom of the slide are a few examples of how our wonderful library media specialists are already putting this vision statement and operational principle to work. David Lurcher defines the purpose of a learning commons as a space that empowers the learner in providing space, resources, and guidance in order to be able to explore, discover, collaborate, and learn in new ways. The core beliefs established by the Reimagine Library Committee advocates for a hub that is accessible for all learners, a space that is both well-resourced and well-designed, and that the space must be agile and flexible enough to serve multiple purposes. This learner-centered space serves as the hub of the school. Sorry. It is a multi-purpose space that typically designs spaces around particular zones of learning. Some of those zones of learning are instructional, creative, collaborative, performance, quiet study, of course, the work area of the librarians, and the ability to transform into a large communal meeting space when needed. By creating a space that is agile and flexible, the Learning Commons can transform easily into a communal gathering space where a large group of students may gather for an author visit, a special speaker, or a multitude of other purposes. The collaborative space, of course, fosters collaboration. It allows for a conversation, unlike what libraries may have been like when we were growing up, where it was expected that you were quiet, if not silent. Learning is social, though. Learning together requires space, the right furniture, equipment, flexibility, and of course, the ability to converse with each other. A well-equipped instruction zone is key. Our library media specialists lead classes in digital literacy skills, digital citizenship, citation tools, and so much more. This space can be used for small group work as well as for an entire class instructional model. A space that facilitates performance, such as poetry slams or a large group read aloud. Typically, you would see in this picture the tiered seating. And that serves, of course, multiple purposes of students being able to sit there and work as well. An ample work zone is important. We are blessed with an extraordinary group of librarians who are responsible for resource curation, book talks, digital fluency lessons, research lessons, tech help, and so much more. So the right space is important to carry on this work, as well as serve as an area for students to ask questions, to consult with the librarians on digital tools. And of course, there is a space that creates a quiet zone for study and for reading with good lighting and individualized furniture. At the high school, for example, that might look like a study carrel. Depending on the age population of the school, the creative zone could encompass a makerspace, video creation, podcasting, Lego walls, robotics, and more. Joyce Valenza is a well-known library media specialist, author, and speaker. This quote really speaks to what the transition from a library to a learning commons is all about. The idea to create a learning hub that empowers the learner, a space that is no longer just about consumption, but about creating and co-constructing knowledge. Our amazing library media specialists have worked hard to create these zones where possible that you've seen so far in this presentation. Over the past 2 challenging years, they have created zones to collaborate, create, code, learn robotics, and of course, have encouraged a love of reading through book talks, author visits, physical and virtual, and special activities. We have created a video creation space in each of the schools, along with a brand new podcasting space at the high school through grants over the past 3 years. Our library media specialists have also begun the challenging work of updating our library scope and sequence to align both to the American Association of School Library Standards, as well as the International Technology Association standards, and of course, to align to our district strategic plan and our Future Ready Tech Plan. You can see in the image how the elements of our Future Ready Tech Plan connect to the work of the library media specialist in each of those elements. So to conclude, our current status is that the Oxbridge Elementary Learning Commons is in the construction process. Hindley, Holmes, and Royal renovation projects have a building committee established. And next, we hope to find funding for architectural study to develop design options, ed specs, and cost proposals to transition those libraries to Learning Commons. Thank you for letting us share this update with you. We wanted to give you a quick peek at the Oxbridge Elementary Learning Commons to be constructed. We look forward to our Libraries Reimagine project continuing to grow and evolve and serve the needs of our community. Thank you.
Dr. McGannigan, thank you. Just, I think you were reading from one slide at the end that we don't have and it's not up there. So just FYI.
Yeah,
just-
no, I see that slide is not there.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. McGettigan. We'll open up to board questions or comments. Mrs. McCammon.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the update. I appreciate it, and it's certainly exciting to see.
Yes.
There's a couple of reasons I think why, well, my first ask is that when the time is appropriate, if we could also have an update on the scope and sequence that you're working on so that we can see how the physical space and the curriculum work are meant to mesh. And because related to that, I think one of the reasons that it's been important to look at both the physical space and the use of the library has been the role of librarians. And it's my understanding that they've taken a much bigger role in the instruction around technology of our kids. And so I think it would be important for us and for the community to understand sort of what the role of the librarian is and why the space needs to look the way that it does because of the kind of instruction that our librarians are currently tasked with carrying out. So I don't know if you all want to give a quick answer to that tonight, but also it would be nice to hear about it in more detail at a future date.
Our librarians have evolved just as the space and the needs have evolved. So the librarians provide that technology training, of course, to our teachers, staff, and administrators. They came through at a time that was incredibly challenging during the pandemic. Our district does not have technology integration specialists like other districts. So the librarians are really our first line of defense in that area. So of course, as we transition to one-to-one from K through 12, they also spent a great deal of time working with students and co-teaching with classroom teachers to make sure that students were not only comfortable with the technology, but understood how to use it at a much more elevated level.
Thank you, Dr.
I'll just add, the written curriculum needs some work, quite a bit of work. Right now, the students in K2 have library time with the library media specialist, but other than K2, 3 through 12, we need to have written guaranteed experiences of how those skills are developing over time. So that's the work that we have to do. It isn't done yet, but we would definitely bring that to the board as plans develop for that.
Thank you, Mr. Schramberg. Mrs. Best.
Thank you for the presentation and the update. I know that, I guess back in 2017, which seems amazing, the
I know.
committee, when they started out, did a tremendous amount of work on all of this. So I think it's terrific that it's still being used and still useful. What I was going to ask is, as we move forward, because we've had this time to sort of create some of these stations and start exploring some of these programs in our libraries as they are right now, it would be interesting to understand what we're learning about what the kids are responding to, what's working well, and what might change as you move forward, since you have had a chance to sort of try things out. So just as we work through this project, would love to keep track of that.
We would love to provide that update.
Dr. Ellie, what are kind of next steps with this?
Right. So I'm sorry that you don't have that last slide there, but essentially what we obviously have Oxford where it is, and we obviously have the other 3 schools with the building committee starting. What is on the slide actually is a recommendation, excuse me, to engage in an architectural study that will provide design options and educational specifications for the high school, the middle school, and a slight modification to Token Lake. If you remember, this was sort of the history of it was sort of attached to the original facility plan. We detached it and we did we went through the portables removal and then the libraries. And this has sat there, right? So we have a couple of options. There's currently no money in the budget to do the design study. There was no money set aside in that. I didn't set that aside. So if we're going to do that, that's probably about $60,000 thereabouts. And we would have to either transfer, ask for appropriation, or not do anything. Right? I mean, so those are sort of the 3 options if we want to move forward with the same type of principal modifications to high school, middle school, and Token Lake. So
I would ask is there any, and this came up in a question from the Board of Finance to me, is there any economies of scale that we should be looking at with the work that's going to be done, the work that's being done at Oxbridge? You kind of have to carve that out, but as we kick off the renovation of the 3 other schools, is there any economies of scale we can get out of furniture and technology and stuff like that when we go about doing from an ordering type thing?
Well, the first thing the board would have to approve is the authorization for that, for the study.
Right.
I don't know that the time is going to align, to be honest with you. I think we're going to be, this is certainly another year removed.
Okay. Mrs. Ockley.
So you would be asking the board to consider an architectural study this year, correct? Is that the ask?
Yeah.
Okay, so is there any sort of estimate of how much that study would cost? Because I think,
Yes.
okay,
60,000.
60,000, sorry. If you
Yes.
just said that, I missed it.
Right.
In
You
that
wanna hear
case,
it.
you're looking at a relatively small dollar and projecting a very high surplus. So I think it would behoove us to find a way to transfer money before going back to the Board of Finance, asking them to tap the general fund. Especially given the surpluses we're currently look at due to what appears to be excess costs. But
I'm good with
I
that.
wouldn't suggest the board consider going back to the general fund, given the projected surpluses.
I'm just giving, the option, but yes.
Further discussion, Mr. Sini.
I would just question, is this an operating expense or would it be a capital expense?
Well, I think the study, because the studies we've had done before under operating.
Okay, just want to verify.
Typically, studies like this are operating.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Worm.
I'm just curious, it talks about in getting ready for this, weeding current collections. Do we know what we're getting rid of?
Now, all of the weeding that they've been doing is according to the American Association of School Library Standards. And those vary in terms of what type of print collection it is, whether they're magazines, books, et cetera. They have a certain shelf life, no pun intended. And to see also what the usage has been. And they also, of course, spend a great deal of time, middle and high school in particular, talking to department chairs to make sure that the resources are aligned to the curriculum. So looking at usage, year, what kind of wear and tear there is, they've been trying to go through and comb out any of those resources that no longer support our particular needs and try and send them to some place that would serve those needs. But also, of course, over the past 2 years, we've also increased our virtual collection quite a bit. So as we've gotten rid of some print, we've also shifted over, right? At the high school, for example, they have a vast collection of DVDs. We no longer have DVD drives, in our technology. So things like that are definitely easy to say, okay, let's set that aside. Let's get rid of that.
So I guess I would ask too, so you go down the path of getting the architectural design, are you building out some ed specs associated with
Yes, so
this?
the ed specs we built out, and then you would have to go through again the building committee, and then you'd have to go through the same architect,
Well, not
So-
necessarily.
So,
You wouldn't need a building committee based on the dollar amount.
well,
so-
based on the dollar amount, it's going to be, I don't know what, the only quotation we ever got, or sort of tentative number we ever received, and that wasn't really fully discussed in any capacity because we didn't go down that road, was, I think it was $4 million. I'm not saying that that's the case, but
Mrs. Ockley.
So have we concluded in spaces like and I know last time we looked at this was a long time ago at this point. And maybe to Mrs. Best's question, have we figured out how to manage in our space? Have we looked at, given like the high school, is there real architectural need there, or is it redeployment of furniture in space? Like, have we made that determination that this is an architectural project as opposed to a reorganization project?
I think you'll find us both, and for the 3 schools, there'll be different levels of that. Just as a wee example, I'm not saying this is the purpose you redo the whole libraries, but for instance, trying to facilitate a meeting this week of 50 people. was surprisingly very difficult in our district, despite all the buildings and resources that we have to acquire a space where a group of people of that size could actually congregate and meet in a collaborative fashion. But the answer is yes, it's a bit of both.
So the original drawings that were shown, I remember stuff around the high school, but that was done, who was that done by?
Northeast Collaborative. Well, if you're talking about it, most recent, it was Northeast Collaborative.
Yeah.
That had these 3 schools in it. Okay.
Correct. But
So there's no action this evening, so I would like, I guess, we'll confirm that you'll come back to us with the recommendation that you outlined. I guess there's a slide missing here, and if you have a preference or some guidance you want to give us as to using, you know,
I'm happy enough to do it through a transfer.
and that would go back out to Northeast Collaborative? Or-
No,
Given-
not necessarily. I have to wait a bit.
Given the dollar amount, we would have to issue an RFP.
Okay, so I guess come back to us with the recommendation and also kind of a little timeline. Because I think the Board of Finance would be interested in understanding if there's any synergies with doing this work in line with the other work that we're doing. And we should just be clear that the timing is different. I'm sure furniture and all can be ordered. All that stuff we've learned is through state contracts and stuff like that. So we would kind of replicate all that type of stuff. All right, anything else to add? Sure, Mr. Seaman.
Is it possible to leverage off the building committee now? I mean, I know the timing's off, but maybe it works pretty well where it kind of piggybacks.
That's the
I-
question, that's the question that was posed. So I think that's something maybe we'll take offline and see if there's an opportunity there. Mrs. Adams.
So I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, but it is no secret to anyone that I have struggled with this Libraries Reimagined project before. And I guess what I would need to understand, and I think the board would help the board to understand, is a needs assessment in certain spaces. I understand it much more at the elementary school. The spaces are much smaller. That we have a large library at the high school. So I think if you're going to do it, you do it right. You do an architectural study. My preference to the board would be do a transfer and do it right and do it well. But I think for the board to understand why it's necessary in some of these spaces would be helpful. Maybe that's just me. Maybe everyone else thinks it's necessary and they get it and they're willing to skip over that. But I do think that I have struggled at the high school and the middle school to understand the architectural need and the kind of the construction need we have to do it. So maybe if we bring this back just a few points to why you really feel that would be helpful. And I think helpful to those people who are just tuning in on the Libraries Reimagined project.
Excuse me, I think even going back to some of those initial drawings, I mean, there was a coffee area in the high
Yep.
school and different things like that. So kind of a refresher on that, where you come up with the
And
needs around it. Yeah,
Just follow, when you say architectural, I mean, this could be just redesign of, like you scrape the space.
I should
and use the
probably say
same box,
I should
right?
probably use the word conceptual,
Yes.
really, because the
Yes.
architecture will
Your
come
point is we're
later.
not Moving walls,
Yes.
ceilings and roofs, like what's the component?
I think you bring up a good point, and Mr. Sini probably has a much better word around it, is that at one point we were looking at coffee bars in some of these places, right? In the original ones that Mr. Deneen and I saw years ago. And I do think if we're looking at towns and money and stresses, coffee bars are going to be a hard sell. So really just understanding what we need, and if it's a conceptual design versus sort of an architectural construction design, being really clear with the public what we're doing and what we're hoping to achieve by doing it.
It'd be great at the two larger schools. We don't have to move walls, ceilings,
Yeah, exactly.
doors.
Well, I think to everyone's point here, that it's a huge, great space at the high school. So if we're not moving walls or ceilings or windows, and just reconfiguring furniture, carpeting, and different type of floor finishes, like, let's understand that conceptual component of it. Mrs. Bass.
I was just going to ask, when we have our facilities tour in a couple weeks, could we make sure that we look at the libraries? A lot of us haven't been in the buildings in a while. It would probably be helpful to get back in the spaces. A little refresher.
Good.
Could I just want to be clear that in terms of, bless you. I think they have been to some degree articulated before. We'll bring them back, but is that also part, I think that could also be part of the actual conceptual design that presented. You okay with that?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Good.
Thank you.
Good conversation. Thank you all. We'll move on to an update on the strategic plan, Dr. Adley and Mr. Tranberg. Thank you, Mrs. McGettigan. Appreciate it.
I'll
Thank you,
start
John.
with the update on the strategic plan. Our last update was January 11th, so that wasn't too long ago. So we tried to provide some more specific information. I believe Mrs. Ackman made a request for some of the metrics and the data. So I went back and I looked at the metrics that go with year one. When we do our end of year in a couple of months, because believe it or not, it's there. Some of those, just for example, in goal area 1, there's a survey that's going out, so that data would inform how we end up with our teaching and learning principles, and that seems to work for all of them. So we provided some more school level specific detail for this one, and then we'll provide more with the metrics to wrap up the year 1.
Great, thank you for your provided.
So I'm just going to point out a few of the highlights this evening, but under goal area 1, one of the foundational things that we're doing is defining our teaching and learning principles. That committee is a subcommittee of the Professional Development and Evaluation Committee, our PDEC. They have met, and we are using a resource. The title of the resource is 17,000 Classroom Observations Can't Be Wrong. So it's based on the work of authors who have been in 17,000 classrooms, and they tried to develop some common language around high quality instruction. So we're going to use that as an anchor to help us through. Under 1C, just to show that through line, we're working with department chairs and making sure that language is consistent as well. In goal area 2, we did start a district level SEL steering committee. I know we've talked so much about social and emotional learning at the board table the past couple of years, and I'm sure for many years before, but with ruler implementation, this group is just serving as a hub with representation at all of the schools, so we can make sure we are providing clear communication between what's happening in all of the schools. Ruler implementation, this year was the faculty training year, and next year it transitions into classrooms. We did hold under 2B, we held the first DEI team meeting on Monday evening, and that meeting went well, as did the rest of Mr. Shelton's visit the past few days. I had a chance to see him with lots of groups. He also worked with the coaches, and several coaches have asked if this can count for their CEUs, because they need those too. So that's something that we want to explore the possibility of. Under goal area 3, which is connected very much to the portrait of the graduate. Right now, as you know, the portrait of graduate is, the written document is done and approved. The next level of work is really how does that function, and what does that look like through grade levels K through 12. There's a slight pause just because NEASC is coming, and we're aligning all of the NEASC self-study information to the portrait of the graduate, because that will be something to take a close look at. With our EduPlanet 21, which will be our new curriculum warehousing platform, we will also be able to align every unit of study to the attributes of the portrait of the graduate along the way, so we can make sure we are preparing students appropriately. With goal area number 4, the professional capacity of staff, we did have our last full day professional development day in February. So believe it or not, we are already looking ahead to professional development for August. And we've created some new processes of just communicating where we keep all that information for the year. So we are planning moving forward to keep PD information for the year in one place, instead of every professional development day being in a separate location. I'll move on to goal area number 5, which is related to communication. We have some updated websites. So all the departments are working on updating their websites, and I know the Special Services Department has done that as well. So I don't know, Shirley, if you have anything to add to that, but you can take a look. It's looking good. Goal area number 6, as you just heard, discussion of Library Reimagined is well underway, and our library media specialists have been very supportive in making that good work happen. And with technology in goal 7, you may have seen Dr. McGettigan's technology newsletter. There have been 2 issues out so far. So we are trying to find the right balance of information that people would like without giving them too much information. So it gets read. And we also have completed our elementary teacher laptop distribution. So that was on the replacement cycle for this year, and that just finished. So it took a while, but everyone has devices. I'm glad to dig in further with any goal area you'd like.
Questions?
I would just like to commend you in terms of, particularly in goal one, I read staff choice a lot, I read student choice a lot, and I read the word differentiation a bunch. And I think the focus on that I commend you for that because it's important.
And it's especially at the middle school. So I'll give a shout out to Carolyn Rodriguez. So ideally, the way it works is we have a strategic improvement plan and then a school improvement plan that she created that really focuses on differentiation and student ownership of learning, student choice. So you can see that playing out not only in the professional development she's provided, but also in the PLCs at that school. So it's great when you see it come to life.
Thank you, Mrs. Best.
Thank you. Thank you. I find this very helpful, reviewing this information this way. So thank you. I had a question on goal number 5. In the, I guess, sort of the memo document, there's language that says invite for strategy 5A, invite stakeholder feedback regarding preferred forms of communication. Where does that exist, or how is that happening?
That's something we haven't surveyed anyone yet on that, but the basic idea behind it is we always struggle with communication. What's too much communication? What's not enough communication? I'm pretty convinced that it's more about how would you like to receive the information, and once we know that, so there's many options, right? We have weekly emails, there are newsletters, there are websites. What are we not tapping into that would help people receive the information that we want them to receive? So I think we need to do a survey to get at that a little bit.
Because I think the tendency is always to give more and more. And maybe with the survey would be an opportunity to figure out where it's too much and where we can pull back some and make it more manageable for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Best. Good. Any other board questions or comments? Good. Thank you, Mr. Tranberg. We'll move on to discussion and possible acceptance of contemplated gift from the Tokenique PTO. Mr. Betts, have you joined us?
Hi, Ryan.
Mr. Betts, how are you? Can you hear us?
Oh, I have to unmute him.
Okay.
I'll be right there. Sorry, Ryan.
No problem. Can you hear me?
As we can. Go ahead. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Yeah. So just want to say good evening, Dr. Adley and members of the board. Yeah. So our edible garden at Tokenique is in need of some significant repairs. The wood holding 5 of our raised beds has rotted, and then they're now falling apart. Kelly Lesage Kelly and Mary Nevin and the rest of the edible garden subcommittee has met with the people at Garden Folk LLC to design a remediation plan to replace those beds at the cost of $2,800. And the TPTO in general has generously offered to donate the cost of that $2,800 to replace those beds.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you to the Tokenique PTO for that generosity. I know these gardens have been a big hit and they're really enjoyed by the students. So any board questions or comments? Yep. May I have a motion? May I have a motion to accept the contemplated gift from the Tokenique PTO in the amount of $2,800 to repair the edible garden at the Tokenique School? Mrs. Best, all those in favor? Second, Mrs. McCammon, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Betts.
Great. Thank you all for supporting that.
We expect to see some tomatoes come the fall.
Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you.
We'll move on to discussion on January 2021-2022 financial report, possible action on proposed budget transfers. Mr. Rudolph.
So this is the financial report through January. We are forecasting a positive balance of 372,678, which is about 1/3% of the budget. The general education RCs do forecast a positive 147,000. The special education RC is a positive 233,000. As mentioned earlier, that's primarily due to excess cost. And then the COVID RC is a deficit of $8,200, which we do have 2 recommended transfers for. The COVID and ARP expenses are about just shy of 1.1 million. The grant was $1,025,000. We have transferred in to date 53,000, and we are recommending another 8,200. Salaries are a positive variance of $96,000. It is primarily coming from salary savings from turnover for 21,000. Some clubs that are not running for 6,600. Some interns that weren't able to be filled at the secondary level for 33,000, and a portion of budget control that remains unused. Operating expenses are a positive 14,462. Legal fees are trending positive by about $26,000. We do have a recommended transfer for a water heater that was not functioning and reserved for emergency repairs in RC12. And then we do have the pending deductible for Storm Elsa for $10,000. Fixed costs are a positive $51,000. Regular transportation is positive by about 26,000. It's primarily due to diesel fuel, which was not used as we were not able in the beginning of the year to charter buses for athletics. Property insurance, workers' compensation, general liability insurance, and student accident insurance also have a small positive balance. Revenue is also positive by about 209,000. Again, that is primarily excess cost at 240,000. We have received the first installment of excess cost as of last week, just over $2.2 million. So we'll update that for the February report. Field and building rentals are positive 8,500, and then ELP tuition is down by about $42,000. So the three transfers recommended for approval. The first is to fund a substitute COVID compliance officer for $5,000. We are recommending taking savings from Fitch transportation savings. $3,200 for an additional personal day for the nurses, and we are recommending taking the funds from savings and diesel fuel, and then $16,000 to replace a hot water heater at Middlesex, and taking funds from savings and diesel fuel as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rule. This was all reviewed at the Finance Committee meeting. Any questions or comments? May I have a motion to approve the January 2022 budget transfers as presented? Mr. Sini, second by Mrs. Achman. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Rudel. We'll move on to action items, the PAR report. Sion.
So as you can see, we were able to hire 2 non-certified staff members to replace people who left mid-year. But what this personnel action report doesn't show is that Darien, like surrounding districts, is experiencing an amazing number of leaves for a variety of reasons, all of them legitimate. But our teachers are stepping up. They're covering for their colleagues, and they're doing a Herculean job this year. I don't think there's a school where we haven't asked them to do more, and they're keeping us going this year. So thank you to them.
Thank you, Marge. Thanks for saying that. A big thank you to them also from the board. I know it's not easy. Marge, any how's the hiring look like going out? Still just, it's going to be a challenging year.
Yes, everyone, all the HR directors in the area feel like it'll be a challenging year.
Okay, good. So we thank our teachers and for all that they've done this year for our students. And now that we're back with a mask choice, good thing. Good. May I have a motion to accept the PAR report as presented? Mrs. McCammon, second by Mrs. Achman. All those in favor? Great, thank you. Michelle, we will go back to public comment.
For participants in person, please wait for the chairperson to acknowledge. For participants in via Zoom, please click the raise hand option. Please state your name and address for the record log. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment.
Anyone in person? All right, thank you. Any of our friends on Zoom?
There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of mid-year discussion regarding the performance of the superintendent of schools pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1-206A. Mrs. Best, second by Mrs. McCammon. All those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, we will move into executive session.